Hello and welcome to the Book Club Review. I'm Kate.
I'm Laura.
And this is the podcast about book clubs and the books that get you talking.
We've all had the dream. A bookshop to call our own. Somewhere to while away our lives among books and fellow readers. A far cry from the usual 9 to 5. Well, a few weeks ago, I spoke to someone who took that dream and made it a reality. In May of this year, Francesca Wilkins opened the Margate Bookshop, a bijou jewel box of a store nestled in the heart of the town and just a stone's throw from the beach. But how did it all come about? Francesca explained that it wasn't her first choice of career.
I studied fine art in London. I was really struggling to get into the sort of industry that I wanted to get into. I was just getting really frustrated because I couldn't seem to even get interviews for decent jobs. So I was kind of having a bit of a rough time, bad anxiety and all of these things, and just didn't know what I was doing with my life. And it was one evening I was chatting to a really old friend on Skype that we kind of said to ourselves, well, what if we could do anything we wanted? And I think, like a lot of people, I always had this pipe dream of owning my own bookshop. In that moment, it felt like, oh, maybe I could actually give this a go. And I started looking into it and doing lots of research and kind of just watching the market. And it started to seem to make a lot more sense than signing up to doing internships or going back to studying. It seemed to be one of the most realistic options that I had.
Did you always want to own your own bookstore?
I think in a way I probably did. It's funny because since doing this, I've spoken to so many people who've said, oh, I've always had this idea in the back of my mind of running my own bookshop. And I think it's an idea that a lot of people have. And I think for me, it was also in the back of my mind for quite a while. But I probably just thought, well, that's not what people do. There is that whole diffused idea that you can't make a living selling books because there's no money in books because of the internet and everything else. But actually, well, so far so good.
And how did you end up in Margate?
Margate and the bookshop sort of came hand in hand. I'd met a few people who'd moved down here or who were working in London and dividing their time between London and here. I then got involved with the Margate Bookie, which is a local literary festival which has been going for 3 years. I met lots of other people, so made quite a few friends down here. And also I'd kind of got to a point where I realised that I didn't want to stay in London. I missed having a real sense of community and living somewhere where you can bump into people and just get to know your neighbours.
The Margate Bookshop is very new. When did you open?
I opened 2 weeks ago.
And how's it going?
It's been going really well. Every time someone asks me, I sound pleasantly surprised, and that's because I think it's going much better than I anticipated, and the sort of feedback and enthusiasm from local people has been absolutely overwhelming.
But you did put in quite a bit of time beforehand, didn't you? Trying to build up that base, get to know the town, think about what sort of books you wanted to stock.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had this idea for about 4 years, probably more than that. It started as doing really basic market research, writing up draft business plans and stuff. Then, like I said, I got involved with the Margate Bookie Festival and I was doing pop-up bookshops with them. I was doing them at the Turner Contemporary Art Gallery and they were hugely successful and the feedback was amazing. That was the sort of confirmation that Margate needed a bookshop. I should probably mention that before this, Margate didn't have a new bookshop or any independent bookshop, which seemed wrong to me. Town needs a bookshop.
Do you have any recommendations for someone who might be thinking of setting up their own bookshop?
I think the most important thing is to reach out to the local community and get involved with whatever literary community that already is there, the way that I did with the Margate Bookie and everyone involved around that. You want to get to know your customers, so you just have to start speaking to local people and get involved, and don't be afraid to ask for help, because I could not have done this just completely on my own. So yeah, ask for help. And I think like anything, it's good to get some sort of hands-on experience before you do something. In my case, I was living in London. I reached out to the bookshops on Charing Cross Road and in that area who didn't really need any extra staff, even if it was someone willing to work for free just to learn the trade. And then I got in touch with Word on the Water, who are based at King's Cross on a 100-year-old Dutch barge. And That's probably the longest standing job that I've had. It was brilliant because it's quite an unconventional way of running a business. So I learned absolutely everything that I know about bookselling through them. Bookselling has an awful lot to do with curation. And because I studied art at university and that was kind of my main interest, to me, that element comes quite naturally. So I think I'm lucky in that. I think the main lesson from Word on the Water is curation and don't leave gaps in the display.
And since you have only been open for 2 weeks, it might be a bit premature to ask this, but so far, what is a typical day like?
So far, my days are still very sort of manic and busy and not what I sort of imagine, like, if I'm still here in 10 years' time, or even in 5 years' time, it'll be a lot more relaxed and I'll have a bit more time to myself as well. But at the moment, it's very much, I'll sort of wake up in the morning and I'm forever trying to catch up with the work that still needs doing on the space in my living area, which is above the bookshop. I open the shop at 10 in the morning and yeah, I sort of get a steady amount of customers coming in around midday, lunchtime, especially the weekend sort of tends to be busy all day.
Is it more social than you expected?
I think it's as social as I expected. At the moment, people are a lot more keen to talk to me, to ask me about setting up a bookshop or to just congratulate me, which is really quite touching.
There is that cliche, isn't there, of the really grumpy bookshop owner who loves books but hates their customers. You don't seem like one of those bookshop owners.
I think give it like 6 months or a year or just wait till winter, I think that will be me. I think potentially.
You have a real range in the shop all around us. How do you decide what to stock?
I go by books that I've enjoyed and loved or books by similar authors that I've loved. Aside from my own personal choice, it's anything that looks really interesting that I'd like to read, things that stand out. There's the classics and cult classics, modern classics. There's a lot of Booker Prize winners and things that I know have been very successful and popular recently. And then a lot of customer recommendations, and that's growing, and that's kind of the ongoing thing. So far, actually, that's probably my favourite thing about running the shop, is having one customer come in and ask me to order a book for them or recommend a book to me, and then I'll put that book in my stock and someone else will come in and buy that book and be delighted in it. And I love that moment. I love sort of being a middleman for that. One about surveillance capitalism, which is this a huge hardback book about this. Well, the title explains itself. And it's £25. So I stocked it because someone recommended it and sounded amazing. And I thought, oh God, is that going to sell? And then sure enough, the next day someone bought it.
Do you stock any particular Margate books?
Yes, there are many, many amazing local authors. It's just incredible the amount of local writers, poets and photographers there are with some beautiful books out. So yes, there's quite a few. There's a lot of books that historically have connections to Margate or are set or inspired by Margate. Apparently T.S. Eliot was recovering from a nervous breakdown and he happened to be in Margate when he wrote The Wasteland. He wrote it in a wind shelter that's just up the road. And it's not the most uplifting sort of literary connection, but it's the one that Margate loves, really. And it's quite nice. Sometimes you'll be walking on the beach and someone will have written in the sand those few lines from The Wastelands.
Do you think he was living here in the winter?
I feel like it was winter. I feel like it would have to have been winter, yeah.
Because Margate's quite a beautiful place in the summertime.
It's absolutely lovely, and on a hot sunny day on the weekend, the beach is just absolutely packed with people. It's almost surreal. It's brilliant.
And so with your visual eye, is it really important that the books you stock are not only just brilliant novels or non-fiction, but are really beautifully made and designed?
Absolutely, and I make an effort to pick the most beautiful editions that I can of new books. There's a whole revival of printed books and the way there is for vinyl. I think it's centred around the fact that people have realised that they want a physical object that they can hold and cherish, and that it should be beautiful and visually appealing. And I think publishers have really picked up on this, so you get really amazing artwork on book covers these days. I think it's a really great time to be buying and browsing and reading books.
And what are your plans for the shop over the next year?
Oh, I don't know. I think for me there was so much about the Margate Bookshop was building up to the moment when I actually had a shop, that the minute I opened the shop, the future just became, it's like it wasn't the important thing. The important thing was getting to this point, and then as to what's next, I don't actually know, to be honest. I will be putting on lots of events, readings, workshops, things to tie in with the local community. Me and my friend will be running a writer's room upstairs that will function as a sort of co-working space and a space to hire for events, potentially hosting small gigs.
And now that the shop is up and running, do you have any time to do your own reading?
No, I do not. Well, no, I'm reading a book at the moment, but I've been reading it for a few months because I have not had much time to myself at all. I had my first day off in months last Monday, and I went down to the beach and thought I'll read a bit of my book. And I did dip in here and there, but essentially I sort of just like lied in the sun, and it was lovely.
What book is that?
Funny enough, it's called Chasing the Sun, and it's a non-fiction book about how sunlight influences our lives and our health, as well as other things around sort of religion and culture. And it's extremely interesting. I really love the sunshine, and it always makes me feel good. So it's quite interesting to just learn more about why that is, and the relationship that we have with the sun.
And do you have a recommendation for our listeners that you think would make a really great book club book?
One of my favourite books that I've read recently is Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari, and also it's not really a sequel, but Homo Deus, which came after that, which are both brilliant books, really changed the way that I view the world. So I think they're a brilliant sort of place to, again, start conversations and just talk about this interesting history of humankind.
If I were to leave today with one book, which would you recommend to me?
I would probably recommend The Wasteland, which I've got some lovely copies of, simply because it's a classic Margate book, I suppose.
If you have a chance to visit Margate, you'll find the Margate Bookshop in Market Place in the town's old market square. If not, you can get a taste of the experience at themargatebookshop.com, where you can browse a selection of the books that Francesca has in stock and order online. You can also find her on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook at the Margate Bookshop.
That's all for this episode. On our next book club show, we'll be discussing I Will Never See the World Again by renowned Turkish writer Ahmet Altan. This series of short essays packs a powerful punch. Each one was smuggled out of the high security prison where Altan has been serving a life sentence on trumped-up charges since 2016. Sounds a bit heavy, and yet Altan writes with grace, humour and wisdom. Of course, the big question is, did it make for a good book club discussion? Listen in to find out.
And in the meantime, if you haven't already, listen into our book club dissection of Golden Hill by Francis Bufford, a fast-paced historical novel set in 18th century New York. Or check out our latest bookshelf episode, where we discuss the other non-book club books we've been reading. Both episodes are available now.
If you'd like to see what we're up to between episodes, follow us on Instagram or Facebook at Book Club Review Podcast, on Twitter at Book Club RVW Pod, or email thebookclubreview@gmail.com. And if you're not already, why not subscribe to us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts?
But for now, thanks for listening and happy reading.